Madam Web is the worst film of 2024, and it's only February. And no, that's not an exaggeration. The Marvels, Oscar-worthy compared to Madam Web. Ant-Man 3, peak Marvel filmmaking compared to Madam Web. Morbius, best Sony Spider-Verse film to ever exist compared to Madam Web. Good lord, guys. Madam Web made me appreciate the Snyderverse. The Snyderverse.
Oh, no.
Madam Web is so bad that I spent the remainder of my day out of the theater debating whether I should even keep reviewing films on YouTube. I felt embarrassed sitting in that theater, and that's not even because of the genuinely autistic meth head next to me that made Patrick Star noises every time Sydney Sweeney came on screen. So let's get this out of the way and break this painful movie down. And to ease the blow, there's a lot of random Sydney Sweeney footage in here to keep you from offing yourself. Madam Web opens in 1973, deep in the Peruvian jungle where Mama Web, 9 months pregnant, is looking for a rare arachnid that has magical healing properties. Such wondrous healing properties that the indigenous tribes of the region have been raw-dogged into myth by it, wherein they're aptly referred to as spider people in local legend. But don't worry, she's got an aide with her, some dude named Ezekiel who, by the way, his name is never said out loud. We only learn about it later because our main character finds a photo of her mom with him and it's written on the back of it. Anyways, Ezekiel is bent on stealing this spider for some reason and murks everyone in the little shanty camp that was set up for the expedition. The spider people that we learned of 3 minutes earlier appear out of nowhere, donning twig and berry Spidey suits, and scoop up Madam Web, who's been shot somewhere but not bleeding, to put her in a cave pool, let a spider bite her, and then proceed to have the cleanest gunshot delivery ever. During this delivery, head shaman Spidey person says that they'll be here when she needs us. To this fresh baby, I guess. Fast forward to 2003 New York City, where Baby Web is now Cassandra Webb, a super unlikable, awkward orphan paramedic who's a NASCAR driver in an ambulance. No, that's not an exaggeration because both the plot and the dialogue like to regularly remind us that women can in fact drive. Cassie has a partner through all of this who's none other than Ben Parker, aka Peter Parker's uncle. This is one of 2 familiar character cameos, by the way, that we'll see throughout this film. We get some interlude about how Cassie is just so awkward that she can't even fathom baby showers and children and motherly love, because apparently that's the symptom of being born from a gunshot victim. The entire scene is meant to paint her as relatable, but instead ends up displaying a lot more of what's become a symptom of these period set films we get in the 2020s, adapted for modern audiences. So, you know, friends, family, motherhood, dick, all irrelevant to the modern woman. All that matters is career and superficial female interactions. This cuts away to an opera house scene where we see barely aged up Ezekiel is hunting single cougars at shows. He takes this raisin skin doll back to his apartment where we see he's got that spider that he killed Mama Web for in the opening, and he's plagued with visions of his death. Specifically visions of our 3 much younger leads decked out in Spider-Man costumes killing him in the near future. Yeah, let's just run with a naked 60-year-old man dreaming of 3 barely legal chicks. Checks out. His date wakes up and he decides to spill his life story to her. And she's just like, yeah, that's completely normal to have visions of really young girls that you think will kill you. But, you know, I suppose that's how you know the lay was good, right? Grandma Gooch is actually an employee of the NSA, and despite being off work, dressed in fancy evening wear, and attending an opera, she still carries her work ID and valuable work tech in her little clutch. Now, for you fellas, when a woman uses an evening clutch, everything she wants to take, she puts in there intentionally. As in, this is an accessory that's generally stored empty when not used. So this means that this shriveled Sally intentionally took her high-level security badge and work tech with her on a night out by herself and still went home with a random guy. Checks out. Anyways, this is how we learn 2 things. He only fucked this chick for the tech he somehow knew she was carrying. being, and that he can poison people on command just by touching them. So what was this valuable tech this random woman had? A lipstick tube that apparently can grant Ezekiel access to all the cameras in New York City. Why does he want that? Because now he can try to track down the 3 minors he's been having visions of by somehow configuring their images into the same program to then search through the city's cameras. I know. Anyways, since he realizes that they're young girls, he just kind of proceeds with a late-term abortion plan. Meanwhile, Cassie responds to a call on a bridge, where in the most unshocking series of events, she gets trapped in a car and is plunged into the river below. And amid drowning, her Spidey powers are activated in a web of visions that allow us to see every major plot point that takes place here on out. Ben rescues her and cut to Cassie later attending a baby shower, despite her going on about how awkward she is around the whole family thing earlier. But guess whose baby shower it is, guys? Mary Parker. You know, Peter Parker's mom, played by none other than Emma Roberts, an actress who's not only best known for playing a bitch in every role, but for domestically abusing her ex-boyfriend Evan Peters. Yeah, about the equivalent of peak cocaine Lindsay Lohan playing Mother Teresa on screen. But to Roberts' credence, for some reason Mary is written as a cunty sorority girl, which she excels at, and we get to see the writers exercise some truly splendid on-the-nose humor.
My mother actually died in childbirth.
Thankfully, Cassie has a dumb vision and dips out of the shower because her and Ben are being called to an emergency. She has more visions wherein she sees the death of a fellow black paramedic who she tries to warn, but he just kind of goes off and ignores her and gets T-boned by a truck. Out of nowhere, by the way, because the road the truck comes out of is too narrow for the said truck, and then the other road is blocked off by the fire and ambulances. But whatever, it just has to happen so she can fail at saving him. And Cassie feels as though there's blood on her hands. Not metaphorical blood, actual blood. Blood on her hands, guys. Hashtag so deep. This death plunges her into a bit of a depression because, you know, blood on her hands. Where despite only one bad thing happening, she begins catastrophizing that she can't change the future, no matter what. But it's okay, guys. She has a vision of a pigeon dying, and then she saves that pigeon. And then that pigeon rescue becomes the reason for her to go to Black Paramedic's funeral. I don't know, it works, okay? And despite being a spin-off Fast and Furious driver, Cassie needs to take the train everywhere, so she goes to Grand Central Station, where coincidentally our 3 soon-to-be murderous heroines also are. And in another large coincidence, Ezekiel's already there, because I suppose when he got bit by the jungle spider, he just got Superman'd, right? Insert one of the most awkward meet-cutes to ever happen in superhero cinema. Cassie keeps twitching out on visions and convinces the 3 girls, the black one notably outsmarting the cops she's outrunning, that were legitimately right behind her. Thank goodness though, as Cassie can now get all 3 off as she sees Ezekiel approaching through another car. Barefoot as fuck, by the way. And as they find reprieve on the platform, they see Night Spidey coming toward them, aka Ezekiel. Because aside from hunting down minors, this dude had a suit on hand for the presumable spider skulking he's been doing for decades. Cassie steals a cab, essentially kidnapping these 3 underage girls, and takes them out to the woods, because that definitely is not in part how Epstein started hurting children. The 3 amigos just run with it, as much like their respective parents. Even they recognize that they have 0 fucking worth in this world, so being sold into trafficking can't be that bad. Cassie has a tism moment when one of the girls asks who that spider person on the train platform was, and decides to fuck right off, leaving these kids with no supplies whatsoever in the woods in a different state to go back to her apartment and sift through her mom's Bible journal. And this is where I present you with some of the best shove this in your mouth and swallow it exposition to ever occur in a blockbuster by nepotism baby Dakota Johnson.
Spider people. Las Arañas. Have you ever heard of Las Arañas? Neither. According to local folklore, they possess powers derived from spider venom and are incredibly fast, incredibly strong, and they can climb like spiders.
Die, you commie fucker! Don't.
Dakota, please, stop acting and just have Chris Martin's washed up Coldplay babies. Or just go back to going full frontal. Either of those would be preferable than seeing you ever act again. So these magic jungle spiders are rumored to have the ability to grant gifts to whoever they bite. Some get super strength, some become masters of the universe like Ezekiel, and others get just the sixth sense. Why did it all come to the forefront when she almost died? Fuck if I know. In the meantime, these girls are hungry and decide to walk to a nearby diner, despite Cassie telling them to stay put and not do anything stupid, and goodness, it's just better if I show you. They may be over 18 in real life, but a post-Me Too screenwriter really thought 3 underage characters dancing on a tabletop was totally cool. And since this movie needs to have some sort of pace, these girls have made basically national headlines in a couple hours, and a lone trucker calls in their location to 911. That software that Ezekiel stole, turns out it also scans 911 calls, because why not? We're just building this as we go, right? I can't begin to state how many times in the theater I thought, Sony thinks this was a good idea to greenlight? But then I also remember Sony hired a political activist group to make their last Spiderman game appropriate. And we all know what that led to. It doesn't stop there, because Sony also likes to flex their music branch, and does so by inserting the longest top 40 play of Britney Spears' Toxic Ever, a song that didn't debut on the charts till January 2004, by the way. And this is probably like spring 2003 this is all taking place. Oh, and Dakota Johnson is off trying to Fast and Furious herself around a transport truck on an empty highway. Since, remember, women can drive. As Ezekiel approaches the diner, Cassie coincidentally drives a cab right through the front of it, knocking him out and rescuing the girls again, taking them to a nearby motel. As the girls sleep, Cassie has what we suspect is a vision, but is now telepathy, as she somehow connects mentally to Ezekiel, who just spills everything to her here. And I mean everything. That the girls develop powers in the future and kill him, the spider bit Cassie's mother, the spiders grant powers, and that he has venom toxin that can be activated by just touching people, which in the following scene Cassie seems to know all about without any sort of, analysis or study. The next morning, Cassie just calls Ben to come take the girls to Mary's, and Ben is just like, bitch, you haven't explained shit to me, but okay, I'll take these now fugitives to a pregnant woman's house because that's a great idea. And it was, because it completely eliminates these girls from having any sort of development of bonding moments, so that Cassie can travel to Peru for a week and hike the jungle alone in jeans.
With all due respect, what the fuck?
Hiking 101, don't hike in jeans unless you want to understand what having Satan himself raw dog you feels like. In just another plot convenience, much like her undoubtable NASCAR skills, Cassie is a pro at navigating herself through dense, foreign jungles, and finds herself not only in the exact spot her mother once was, but Spider Jesus as well, who's just there because he made a promise to be there. Remember? Why is he Spider Jesus? Because this fucker apparently knows everything about anything and just has the ability to sucker punch your soul into an unseen reality. More swallow it, slut exposition, and Cassie discovers the extent of her sixth sense powers as Spider Jesus shows her that everyone bitten by the spiders is connected. And that also gives you the ability to see into the past. I guess. As Cassie understands why her mom went to the jungle now, because she was about to be a cripple baby or something. Oh, and apparently Cassie hated her mother this whole time for dying. Yeah, that's a random character backstory element that's just thrown in. Fuck you, Mom, for dying while giving birth to me, you selfish bitch. Now that Cassie has the power of parental love, Spider Jesus gives her the extra boost she needs to carry forth against Ezekiel.
And when you take on the responsibility, great power will come.
This is my new imaginary warning light. Whenever it starts blinking, a situation has 10 seconds to resolve itself before I flash white with rage and kill someone.
Meanwhile, Mary goes into labor back in New York, and despite knowing these girls need to be out of sight, Ben crams them all into his car anyways, and they get spotted on those cams. Remember, Ezekiel's got the cam tech, right? Barefoot, yet again, Ezekiel is already on the move, and due to men bad at driving, is able to corner them in the worst traffic pileup I've ever seen occur from absolutely nothing happening. Is this how life in New York is? Anyone? Huh?
Bueller?
But don't worry, because before he can throw the grenade he actually pulled out of his bussy, Cassie saves the day in a stolen ambulance by driving it down a road that's actually a parking garage connected to the back of a billboard that's overlooking the square they're all traffic jammed in. Don't believe me?
Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant. Oh, this is a great story. You're gonna love it. I'm just gonna get another box of wine.
Thank you.
Just the best story. Oh, man.
Now, remember that black dude Cassie couldn't save that had her all emo on the couch? Well, her bright plan, based on her visions to defeat Ezekiel and save the girls, who, remember, have no powers, is to take them back to the building that burned down earlier, which is also still full of bloody explosives. Running, squealing, dumb womanisms ensue, and Cassie eventually harnesses her true power to ghost tentacle herself out and save these useless girls. In doing so, Ezekiel punts her, he falls, gets crushed by a Pepsi sign, and she falls into the harbor, taking a nut shot to the eye while underwater, which, despite only hitting one side of her head, ends up scarring both her eyes and turning her blind. The film closes out with her basically haraming these three kids and her looking out of a Doctor Strange-like window as the female love child of Magneto and Cyclops.
What the fuck is this?
There's so much objectively wrong with Madam Web that I could EFAP this entire movie and it would actually take 12 hours. This cast is absolutely horrendous. I really don't give two farts. You can't convince me that Sydney Sweeney is a good actress after watching this. Everything about her performance is stiff as a board, as though her going nude in every other film was the only thing that really invoked talent. Dakota Johnson fails just as hard, delivering an equally uncomfortable and static performance that makes her 50 Shades role as Anastasia Steele look deserving of an Oscar. The two other representation checkmark females are forgettable, as neither are given enough screen time for you to adequately assess their talent. And if those 4 stale bread slices weren't enough, I really can't fathom how the casting thought that Tahir Rahim was menacing enough to play any kind of villain. His performance carries no weight, no emotion, and periodically throughout his scenes, I was wondering if post-production had redubbed all his lines, as his mouth regularly does not line up to what he's saying.
Are you Brigadier Chow of Shenwu Fort? Quite right. Now I think it's time you die.
But I really can't blame the actors when whatever they were working with had no substance. There's no fluidity between sequences, no depth, no emotions behind these characters. It's like someone just typed in, "Write female Spider-Man character in the Spider-Man universe," without using any mainline Spider-Man characters, into ChatGPT, and the program self-deleted itself, immediately trying to synthesize 20 years of Spider-Man cinema with Tampax ads. Unlike Peter Parker, who more or less is developed as an awkward teen trying to find his place in the world, as both a lower-class citizen and a coveted superhero, there's reason to invest in what happens. The same can't be said for any of these leads. Sydney Sweeney included. Cassie is just awkward for the sake of being awkward. There's really nothing endearing about her. She's a pretty shitty friend in that not only does she fail to tell Ben what's going on with her, but she gets him to harbor 3 girls that she's been accused of kidnapping and also just doesn't really give a fuck about what's going on in his life. She fails to connect in basic social situations, despite her actually being a lonely cat lady and recognizing that. The script leans into her paramedic background to supplement giving her reason to care about the spider teens, outside of my visions. Along with her broken condom personality, Cassie Webb is a straight-up Mary Sue. She manages to escape every dangerous situation she puts herself in, and the 3 powerless teens, even though the film consistently reminds us that she cannot control her clairvoyancy. The 3 Spidey women are the most forgettable characters of the MCU, and we had the Eternals. They introduce themselves once, but have no personality outside of Black teen, Hispanic teen, and Sydney Sweeney. They all act like the stereotypes you'd expect them to, which makes it even worse. Sweeney is probably given the most screen time of the 3, and it's strictly because they know people will masturbate in the cinema when they see her, even if she's frumped up and has too many clothes on. By the way, we never see these girls actually do anything. In the final fight sequence, if you can call it that, it's like watching a bunch of drunk babies shove each other at a living room Bluey convention. The scenes of them in the suits that you see in the trailers, those are all the scenes. You never actually see them in costume outside of the premonitions and visions. And in addition, Ezekiel explains that the girls acquire powers to kill him in the future, but there's no setup for that to happen aside from Magneto Cassie alluding to the fact that she pimps out these chicks for the fight against evil using her ghost spirit tentacles. These terrible characters unite in a script, if it weren't painfully obvious already, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever and raises more questions than answers. Like, why does the bad guy walk around New York City barefoot when he's in normal clothes, but then has boots on when he's in his spider suit? Why do the Peruvian spider people go out of their way to save people that have invaded their home to more or less industrialize a species they hold sacred? Who the fuck let a pregnant woman at 9 months wander into the Peruvian jungle? Are we gonna ignore that this iteration also means that Spider-Man costumes were originally from the twig and berry fuckers in the jungle? How does baby Cassie, who was officially born a Peruvian citizen in the opening, end up back in the US? Why is the most endearing scene in this entire film of 3 underage characters table dancing? How come Cassie steals a cab, drives it in between states, leaves the country for a week, and comes back to continue driving that same stolen, fucked up cab with no consequences? What was the point of putting Ben and Mary Parker in here, played by actors that most mainstream audiences wouldn't recognize? Why, after a fire, would people continue to stock explosives in a structurally unsound warehouse? As Cassie intentionally points out, since No Way Home made all of the Spider-Verse's canon, where does this one fit in? Since it aligns with neither Maguire, Garfield, or Holland's versions of Spider-Man. Did Pepsi think the product placement would redeem themselves for the overly politicized Kendall Jenner commercial from a few years back? And most importantly, why the fuck is half this movie filmed like a YouTube action parody skit?
I don't understand.
I've been searching for that spider for years.
No, we're okay.
Oh gosh, how could I forget the biggest sin that this entire script commits? Modernisms. What is a modernism, you ask? In recent years, it hasn't been missed that the entertainment industry has intentionally been shoving a lot of liberal political ideology in our faces. It's culminated most recently in race swaps, gender swaps, gay swaps, and uglifying characters that were otherwise portrayed as straight-up foxes. I'm talking to you, Zendaya MJ, you hobo-looking mofo. So, in order to adapt period-set storylines rather than play to the actuality of those times, stories and characters are revised to suit the current-day standards that didn't exist 10, 20, even 30 years ago. The most egregious example I can think of is season 4 of The Last Kingdom, which up until that season was a pretty badass exploration of the early formative years of what we now know today as England. Season 4 took a character, Brita, who was actually not that bad until they decided to turn her from struggling to find her place between cultures, plot, and turned it into nothing but an unnecessary angry woman who hates men for just being men. It's such a stark 180 on the character that it breaks all immersion for the entirety of the series. While in a much more modern era, Madam Web commits the same sins. Hispanic teen? Turns out her father dipped because he was randomly deported one day and she's on her own now. Were people getting deported then? Yes. Is it a point of interest that develops the character in any way or has an impact on the plot? No. A bunch of messaging about recycling that doesn't give anyone personality? Yep, we got that. Hairstyles and clothing that were in no way popular during the early 2000s? But of course. Music that didn't even come out in 2003 but is close enough in the era that they can milk it for what it's worth, while simultaneously implanting that a flop of a film is being re-released for the first time ever on streaming just the day after this comes out?
Interesting.
You know, the more I think about it, the more I understand why Britney Spears' Toxic is probably in here. Crossroads aside, this talentless hack S.J. Clarkson seems to have watched the music video for the song, and her inherent jealousy for looking like a wrinkled version of Pee Wee Herman just flew into overdrive when she saw what a bangin' bod Britney used to have. So she copied the plot for the video, made all 4 female leads hotter self-insert versions of her real-life self, so that she could finally feel confident enough to bag that dinky Starbucks barista she eye fucks every morning when she goes to get her no-foam sugar-free vanilla latte. Don't believe me? Here's some scene-by-scene comparisons.
Nope. Hey gang, nope. We're not doing that.
Sony has made blunder after blunder with these Spider-Man movies since 2007's Spider-Man 3, of which Raimi was so ashamed of, he essentially disavowed Sony creatively. And of this new universe, of which Madam Web marks the 4th entry after Venom, Venom 2, and Morbius, continues to leave us asking why the fuck they continue to invest in whatever the hell this is. None of these films were good, and the only saving grace is Aaron Taylor Johnson's drip-worthy physique in this summer's Craven. I really could go on about every single problem in this movie. Not a single scene is spared in Madam Web, and because of that, I can understand why Dakota Johnson still hasn't seen it. The only mark this movie will leave, aside from being forgotten by the time 2024 ends, is that it somehow made Morbius look like the Iron Man of modern Marvel cinema. Anyways, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for stopping by and stay frosty, friends.